Hi everybody, welcome to another table talk. So today I just wanted to do a bit of a discussion about this airplane, which you've been watching my videos, my YouTube channel as of late. You've seen a lot of this both in table talks and in the air. This is a modified RC Powers Su30 version 4. It's a design that's been around now for over 4 years. Unfortunately, RC Powers just transitioned to some new ownership, and they're doing their best to get all the plans over to the new website. But currently the plans are not available for sale. But you know, hopefully my hashtag bring back Su30 V4, maybe that'll generate some more interest in it. But anyway, I was actually kind of late to the party. This plane had actually been around for a couple of years before I decided to build it. Don't know why, just some, you know, personal paradigms, I'm not sure. It was originally marketed as the hovering park jet, which I guess didn't really interest me. But anyway, I got off my, you know, get out of that rut, and I decided to build it a couple of years ago, and I've just been having an absolute blast with it since then. I would say it's probably at least top 5, maybe even top 3 of my favorite overall park jet that I've flown in 6 years of flying park jets. It's really just an incredible airplane. Now, I obviously made some modifications to it, not because, you know, it was a horrible airplane. You know, watching other people fly it for the first 2 years it was out, you know, it's a great great airplane. I just been flying park jets for about 6 years now. I've built probably over 80 of them, and I just know what works for me. So that's kind of why I did the modifications that I did. But I'm also going to talk about a couple of the features that RC Powers designed into this, because RC Powers has led the way in a lot of very unique design features that over time have made, you know, found their way into other people's designs, and they're just, you know, really groundbreaking type stuff that I really find helps my planes fly really, really well. Now, you know, I know it's maybe not the most scale looking Sukhoi out there. There are a lot more scale looking Sukhoi 30s, 27s around that you can find, but for me it just flies so well, and it has so much versatility, which I'll talk about a bit more in detail. So the original design, this is from the instructions. Obviously, you can see it. Crunch the nose there. It has canards. Also, the elevons were quite a bit, or are quite a bit larger than what I ended up using. The original dimensions of this stock, if you don't do anything to the plans, is a 30-inch wingspan, 42 inches long. So even the first one that I built, I downsized it just because I find, for me, for the power setups and the way that I like my planes to fly, I don't normally build planes that are bigger than about 27-inch wingspan, especially since I started using quad motors, these smaller quad motors in my park jets. So one other thing I'm going to talk about here is this plane is made primarily out of Dollar Tree foam or Adams Ready board. The fuselage, the wing plate, this back plate, all Dollar Tree foam. I did use Depron for the pardon me, for the elevons, and also for the nacelles here, pardon me, and the vertical stabilizers and rudders. Just because in my design or my building experience using Dollar Tree foam, I like to use foam that's naturally stronger and stiffer, that doesn't add a lot of weight, because the paper left on the Dollar Tree foam it can be quite heavy. So using Depron, it keeps a real good longitudinal strength over the plane. But I have I think maybe I already mentioned, I have 283 flights on this plane now, which is the most flights I've ever had on a plane made out of Dollar Tree foam. So I just wanted to talk a little bit. You can see it's a little dirty there from the dust off of the dead grass flying all summer. Okay, so I'll start from the front. I did, as I mentioned already, I did take the canards off. What I did there was when I cut out the plans, I actually took this sort of this portion of the leading edge of the wing and the lurks from the SU27 version 5 by RC Powers. And just because I like the way that curve looked, but you know, you could look at some pictures if you got a little bit of patience and artistic skill. You could probably just draw that, as long as you know you make sure that both wings are the same. And what I did to compensate for the fact that I removed those canards and lost a little bit of lift, I personally just don't like canards. I just don't find that you know, with the way that I fly and the conditions that I fly in, I just haven't had the greatest of luck with canards. I just prefer the more sleeker look. So what I did was to compensate for removing those canards was I actually extended the leading edge of the wing by pretty close to 3/8 of an inch, I think, outwards, you know, to give me a greater wing area to help provide more lift and also lower the wing loading. What that did also was it moved my CG forward a little bit, and then what I did was I designed my own KF airfoils. I think I'm 40% of wing root here, you know, along the fuselage, and about 35% of wing chord out here at the tip. And you can see that you know, it's a pretty tight fit here, because you need to adjust the prop slot when you're using these shorter quad motors. So my KF runs sort of right along where the corner of the prop slot is there. And I also extended the KF out along the leading edge root extension there, just on the top, not on the bottom. So what that did was it really tightened everything up around the CG. The back of my battery is actually sort of right about here, so it makes everything, you know, the largest concentration of mass is very close to the center of gravity. You know, battery, speed controller, receiver, all the servos, motors are all within a very tight, compact area around the center of gravity, which helps the plane, in my experience, it helps the plane feel more balanced when it flies. And it also makes maneuvering in all three axes more effortless and efficient, because the plane, you sort of have science working for you instead of against you. You don't have a big long moment of inertia. So that worked out really well. So I wouldn't probably you know, extend the wing forward any further, because then I'd end up running into problems with trying to balance it. Like, I'd probably have a bit of a, if I wanted to go down to a smaller battery, say a 1600 or 1800, I might actually have some problems balancing it that way. But it worked out just perfect, because I fly on 3S. I fly with a 2200 3-cell battery all the time. Anyway, that's all I ever fly with. Okay, so moving back to the wing, I went with. I'm just going to pull this light over here a little bit. Hopefully, it's not in the way. The stock ailerons normally extend the entire length of the wing. So my favorite setup is with my ailerons being about 60% of the trailing edge. What I've also found is I'm not a terribly good slow speed or pilot or high alpha pilot. So what I've also found sometimes is with those full length ailerons is I found that I caused myself to have tip stall come on a lot quicker, and I find that I can hold off tip stall a lot longer by just having, or not even have it at all, if I have these smaller ailerons. But they still provide plenty of authority in the roll. All I did was I just went with the same dimensions out to about here, you know, measured what 60% was, and then just made the outside edge of the aileron right out here. So I went with a different shape of rudder. The rudder on the stock one, it kind of comes forward at an angle and then goes down at an angle. So it's quite a bit of a larger rudder, but it has a couple of different angles to it. My personal preference for my rudders is I like to have rudders, the hinge line be parallel, or not parallel, perpendicular to the wing plate. So I just went with that, and it's plenty of rudder authority for, you know, any sort of high alpha that I might want to do, or stall turns, or even just flying around in the wind when I need to have a little bit of yaw authority. Now I should say that this plane is actually built at 84%, I think, 84% of stock. Now on the prop slot, you can actually, the prop slot, even on the stock one, this surface actually goes out a little bit over top of where the nacelles are on the bottom here. So what I did was I trimmed that right along where the nacelle would be, so that I've got lots of room in my prop slot. Even at 84%, I could probably go down to, or I could go up to like a 6.5 inch prop if I wanted to. But this, running a 6-inch prop with this prop slot, it really allows the prop to have a lot of room to breathe, and also for, you know, the prop wash to get off there efficiently. So, excuse me. The other thing that I did was, as I've already mentioned, I downsized the elevons. I also went on the stock one. It has sort of what the, you know, full flying elevon with the counterbalance thing that comes forward. I prefer this this type of elevon. This was something that RC Powers introduced on the MiG-29 version 4 and the Su30 version 4, I think. I can't remember if it was on the F-18 as well, but anyway, I just prefer to have this little bit of horizontal stabilization. These I actually used, I downsized from the NAMC Su27 to get this, you know, this sort of the boom thing out the back here for sort of scale looks. Again, you could, you know, if you had a little bit of artistic ability and some patience, you could use a picture of an Su30 and kind of draw it out yourself if you wanted to have that look. Now what I did was I wanted to make these, because I had originally built this airplane to go super fast, I wanted to reduce the span of the elevon. So all I did was I took a diagram of the Su30 that I found on Wikipedia. I measured the wingspan and the elevon span on the real one, and then, you know, got a ratio of the wingspan to the elevon span, and then all I did was I, you know, knowing that my wingspan on this plane is 24.5 inches, then I used that ratio to figure out how wide I needed this span to be. So even though that these are considerably smaller, again, I'm not trying to hover it, but this plane does high alpha probably easier than any other plane I've ever flown. And again, I'm not a very good high alpha pilot, but it does high alpha very, very easily, even with these smaller elevons, and is super maneuverable. I still have plenty of authority if I want to crank the throws up and do the the sort of the culbit maneuver, where you see the plane essentially just rotates right on the center of gravity, does like a super tight flip almost. I can still do that if I want to, and it stays pretty stable. So yeah, so there's the mods that I made. Not you know, not a ton. Mostly just downsizing or changing the shape of some control surfaces, and of course removing the KF or the elevons, wow, the canards, and then making my 40% my own KF4s. So some very unique design things that I think have been really groundbreaking from this plane, and some other planes that, you know, things that RC Powers have added into planes over the years. This plane has, you know, one of the things that first struck me about this plane when I first saw it was how far forward the motor is compared to a lot of other park jets I'd seen previously. If I measure this plane from the nose here out to the very tail, and then I measure where the motor is, if the nose is 0 and the tips of the booms is 100, this is at around 55. So it's almost exactly, you know, it's pretty darn close to being right in the middle of the plane, lengthwise. And I've used that, you know, in modifying several other planes, F-22 version 5, T-50, F-18, even the NAMC MiG-35B, which I helped design, I've been experimenting with moving the motor on that even further forward, getting it closer to, you know, between around, depending on the plane. Obviously you can't always do it because of structural limitations in the design, but I found if I can get a motor, you know, sort of around, for me anyway, around that 55 to 60 spot, you know, if the on the plane, very, very close to the middle, it tightens it up around the center of gravity, and the plane just seems to fly far more balanced and responds much more quickly. So this is the stock motor location. I didn't bother playing around with that, and I probably never would. It's really you know, a great innovation by RC Powers there. The other neat thing is that this light was introduced on the MiG-29 version 3 initially. This has the vertical stabilizers are towed in just slightly. It's, you know, if you look at it and you know what you're looking at, you can see, but it's what the air sees. So it creates like a little, almost like a little bit of a wedge. And what that does in park jets that have, you know, perpendicular vertical stabilizers is it really, in my experience, it really helps with, especially with yaw stability. You know, when you're flying in the wind, or you're flying at high speed, or you're up in a turn and there's a little bit of wind, it really helps smooth it out and keeps it, you know, keeps the nose from wandering around a little bit. And it doesn't so much work with planes like F-18, F-22, where they're already canted out. They're not perpendicular to the wing plate. I think it just creates perhaps too many angles, but I haven't actually really tested it, so quite possibly could be talking through my hat, like happens sometimes. So anyway, so that was a really, again, another groundbreaking thing that RC Powers kept in this plane, and has also kept in some of their V5s. These ventral fins here, they're not, you know, they're not terribly scaled. They're pretty big, but they really serve a purpose in really helping this plane fly. Again, it really helps in its tracking in the yaw axis. It's almost like, you know, when you're carving it around, it's almost like these are you know, like a keel, or, you know, helps like an edge if you were skiing, to really keep the plane carving in a very true tracking. Also, I think they also help, you know, when you're doing that very aggressive cull bit type maneuver. It helps to keep the plane from wandering around. I did trim about 5 millimeters, I think, off the bottom of this, because again, I was going for some speed with this plane, and it still provides great stability. So, okay, so let's talk about some of the things that I've learned with the Dollar Tree foam. So when I built this, I knew, you know, because it sort of sits when it lands, quite often, you know, you come down, you're landing, you hit these these fins in the back touch first, and then it comes down on the nacelles, and then quite often the nose will touch the ground and bounce along. So what I did was I used this glue. This is Craft Medley Premium Craft Glue. I have never been able to find it online, but luckily I can find it at my local Dollar Tree store. It's essentially the exact same formula as Bob Smith Industries Foam Cure. So it when it dries just like epoxy, but it stays clear. Pardon me. So I put, you know, you can probably see here the nose is pretty dirty, but I put that glue, yeah, right up here to this air intake, and that has really kept this foam, because this is bare. This Dollar Tree foam on the fuselage doesn't have any paper on it. If I had left that foam bare, it would have just chewed that all to pieces. So that's worked out really well. I also put the same thing on the nacelles here, so you can see they're a bit chewed up. I think I've had one of these crack, even though they're made out of Depron. But again, just smear a little bit more of that glue on there, and these are holding up really well. Again, you know, coming up on 300 flights, it's worked out really well. I also put that glue on these fins here. You know, the corner's gotten rounded off a little bit, but again, this foam is holding up really well. And also just because, you know, if I have to flip the plane over, I put it on just along the very tips of these vertical stabilizers, and it helps protect that foam and keeps it from, you know, kind of getting rounded off over time. So mistake that I made, I don't know why, I got a little bit aggressive here cutting foam away to run my wires and everything in, and you can see it looks like my plane was attacked by the blob. This is actually in here. This is actually the foaming Gorilla Glue. I like to put that along, especially when I build with Dollar Tree foam. I like to put that along the motor mount and where the foam contacts the. There's a spar that. As you can see here, there's a spar that goes through here, because what happens sometimes with the Dollar Tree foam is that the motor will cause the foam to flex around the spar there, so that Dollar Tree or that Gorilla Glue really just locks it right in and keeps it super solid. So I ended up cutting this a little bit, so I've broken, because the battery sits right here, I've broken this foam a couple of times with harder landings. So I fixed that by putting just some of the mesh drywall tape on there, and then smearing some more of this this glue on there, and it's held up really, really well. I did crack it one time, you know, as the ground got really, really hard late in the summer because of the heat. I did crack it a little bit here, but you know, nothing, touch wood, nothing too drastic. If I was to build it again, which I probably will, I would cut some little vent holes here, maybe in the side underneath the wing to help get more airflow. Right now the only vent hole that I have is this one that's right here, so I'd probably put some more here along the side, you know, sort of where you can't see them, just to help optimize, get some more airflow going through the electronics bay there. So yeah. So anyway, this is actually the fourth of these that I've built. I had one last winter that I built that was a little bit bigger than this. That was kind of my winter beater plane. I you know, used it as a test bed, put several, almost 200 flights on that one. And I had the one that I built before this one, unfortunately I lost because my prop nut, I was using the wrong prop nut on this quad racing motor, and I went to hammer it on a 4-cell run, and the torque just torqued the prop right off, and I did a horrible job of my dead stick landing and wrote that plane off. So, so from a standpoint of performance, this is probably the most versatile. I think of all the park jets I've ever flown, I think it has the largest speed envelope. So, you know, you can fly it down. I can probably fly this plane slower than just about any other plane in my hangar, and still feel fairly comfortable with it. And like I said, I'm not a terribly good park jet pilot flying around slow. Just me. Also, very, very easy to do high alpha. When I do high alpha with this, any experimenting I've done with high alpha, I've actually I just use elevons and rudder. I have done some experimenting with flaperons, spoilerons, and I find it actually stays more stable and is easier to fly with just elevons and rudder. And you know, I'm not talking about super extreme high alpha, but you know, 40-45 degree angle of attack, and it goes into high alpha without any problem, and stays, for me, it stayed very, very stable. So you know, that end of the spectrum. And then, you know, I had built this plane to try and break 100 miles an hour, and pardon me, because of some build errors, excuse me, I didn't quite get there. But you know, if you're looking for a plane that's super fast, I think probably, you know, clipping off the canards helps a little bit, downsizing the elevons and things like that. But it's also one of the most sleek and fastest airframes I've ever flown. But the nice thing is it stays very, very stable all the way through the speed envelope. You know, even when you're just hammering the throttle and it's screaming by on 4S and you're getting close to 100 miles an hour, it stays super stable. Even at this smaller size and weight, I'm just over 18 ounces with a 2200 battery with this plane and a 24.5-inch wingspan. Even in up to about a 10-mile-an-hour wind, it's very flyable. Like, I would take this plane to the field and fly it before I'd take like my bigger F-22 or T-50. It just is a really, really stable plane in the wind, up to about 10 miles an hour. Beyond that, I probably won't fly too much anyway. But yeah, so I can't say enough good things about this plane. I wished I had not wasted so much time getting around to building it, because like I said, it's top 5, if not top 3 of my favorite park jets of all time. It's just such a joy to fly, and this one will probably be converted into my winter beater this year, and then I'll probably build another one maybe over the winter with a little bit nicer paint job. This is just a magic marker paint job that I put on it to keep it light. So anyway, like I said, unfortunately right now, if you haven't purchased this plane before already, as being a member of RC Powers in the past, hopefully RC Powers, under the new ownership, will have it available on their website before too much longer, because if you're looking for a really versatile, super fun plane to fly, very easy, it's not super easy, it's not like a profile MiG-29 version 1 or anything, but it's a very, very straightforward build, for a score and fold. It's one of the nicest, easiest builds for a score and fold that I've ever built. Very low parts count, which also helps. Anyway, like I said, fingers crossed that it is going to be back sooner rather than later, available for on the RC Powers website. So there we go. Thanks very much for watching. Blue skies, calm winds to everyone. Park jet noise. Yeah, the sound of freedom, baby. Take care.